प्रेजेंटेड बाय ईबिक्स कैश। हर खुशी के लिए काफी है।
Hello and welcome. You're with us here on Business Today. I'm Abha Bakaya. Here are the headlines tonight. Tatas back in the Air India cockpit. Government hands over control of the airline to conglomerate after 69 years. Tatas likely to appoint expat to run the airline. Sensex falls 581 points as Fed signals rate hike. Nearly 2.6 lakh crore rupees of investor wealth wiped off. Nifty ends Jan F&O series nearly 2% lower, with IT, pharma and realty indices falling the most. Fed signals rate hikes coming soon amid inflation concerns. Researchers warn interest rate hikes from the US Fed and other central banks are likely to worsen a global debt crisis. Oil on the boil. Brent crude hits $90 a barrel for the first time since 2014 on the Russia-Ukraine tension. Later on the show, we get you an exclusive conversation with Arvind Panagariya on the state of the economy and what he expects from the budget this time round. Tatas back in the Air India cockpit. After 69 years, the Tata Group has officially taken over Air India from the government. After a disinvestment plan that stretched for decades, the government was finally able to find a buyer in the Tata Group. Tatas had won the bidding process in October with an 18,000 crore rupee bid. The entire 2,700 crore rupee was received by the government and shares were transferred to the Tatas. 15,300 crore debt was retained by the government and a new board has taken charge of the airline. The 12,000 employees to Tata will be retained for a year. With the takeover of Air India, Tata could control around 26.7% of the country's aviation market share. Tata Sons chairman N. Chandrasekaran, who called on the Prime Minister ahead of the handover, was delighted to have Air India back on board. Chandra said that the group was looking forward to working with everyone to create a world-class airline. Over 69 years after it was nationalized by the government of the day, Air India is back where it belongs. Founded as Tata Airlines in October 1932 and nationalized in 1953, the cash-strapped airline is now back with the industrial group that had made it one of the best airlines in the world.
The Maharaja is returning home to the Bombay House. After 69 long years of being nationalized and grounded into a pale shadow of its glorious past by a mix of politicians and bureaucrats, Air India is now back with the Tatas.
Well, the formalities have been completed. The Air India disinvestment transaction is closed. The shares have been transferred to the Tatas, which is a successful bidder. Consideration amount has been received. And so now the new owners are the Tatas.
We are totally delighted that this process is complete. Very happy to have Air India back in the Tata Group.
After years of flying with heavy losses, a bloated workforce and continuous interference by government servants and politicians who preyed on its first-class seats, Narendra Modi government has succeeded in doing what was considered impossible. Even Arun Shourie, the die-hard prophet of privatization who undertook the largest privatization drive in India's history under Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, may not have dreamt of how the return the controls to Bombay House would happen. Modi's determination to get the government out of the business of flying civil aviation is what is behind the sale. Also behind the sale is the 84-year-old patriarch of the group, Ratan Tata, and his determination to reclaim JRD Tata's legacy. This is what drove India's largest conglomerate, the $310 billion Tata Group to take control of an airline that was largely flying on the fumes of taxpayer-funded indulgence. Tata Group Chairman Emeritus Ratan Tata had shared an emotional message on social media immediately after the group had won the bid to take back the reins of Air India. Sharing an old photograph of JRD Tata stepping down from an Air India aircraft, Ratan Tata had written, "Welcome back Air India," adding that former chairman JRD Tata would have been overjoyed if he were here today. So even as the formalities of the takeover are underway, a new board will be constituted soon, replacing the outgoing government-appointed one. The Tatas are likely to appoint a veteran aviation industry expert as the CEO. The merger of Air India Express and AirAsia India is also set to commence next week. The Tatas, who are partners with Singapore Airlines in Vistara, have made a fresh multi-year blueprint to restore the lost glory of the Maharaja. Big ticket changes like fleet and cabin upgrade will take time, but the initial focus would be on improving an on-time performance, better meals, and a more customer-friendly approach. Bureau Report, India Today.
Let's also go across to our correspondent Karishma Asudani, who's been tracking all these developments on ground. Karishma, what's the revival process for Air India looking like going forward?
Well, it's a change of guard at the helm, with the government, of course, transferring its shares to Tata Group's Tatas, which now 100% owns Air India. Let me tell you, this is not a normal return, but it's a mega return. After 69 years, Air India Maharaja gets back to Tatas, and what a ride it has been. In fact, after the meeting today, Deepam Secretary, who played a key role in privatization and, of course, selling of Air India to Tata, also mentioned that they've received the binding rupees 2,700 crore, and Tata's, of course, will take over the rest 15,000 crore. That is a part of the transaction deal which was signed and executed well on October 8th last year. Now, Tatas will be owning, of course, 3 airlines in the country, where they have 100% stake in Air India, followed by 50% in Vistara and about 83% in AirAsia. This also, of course, keeps a fresh new booming hope in the aviation market, keeping in mind the turbulence that the sector had gone through.
All right, Karishma, thanks so much for joining us on that. We've also got Ameya Joshi with us, aviation expert, to give us a sense of how Tatas will bring back Air India. Ameya, what's it looking like? It's a huge task ahead of them. How do you see them working towards bringing Air India back on track?
It's one of the biggest questions which are being asked today, and it's going to be a very challenging task. Let's be honest. They have 2 airlines in which they have majority stake for the last 6 to 7 years, which have not been profitable. You had a chance to start as a clean slate and you couldn't make it profitable. So to take over this mountain of debt, the challenges which come with it, and then try and turn around is much more difficult. And it's going to be challenging. It's going to be a long road. But personally, I feel eventually they will reach there, and there are reasons to it. With this acquisition, they are in a position where they are controlling 1/4 of the market than the minuscule market which they were controlling before. And as and when over the next 2 to 3 years, they get to a point where they can merge this and form a larger airline, that's when they would be in a commanding position to make that change happen towards profitability.
Ameya, what does Air India need to do, or what do the Tatas need to do with Air India to ensure that they, really turn it around and at a fast pace, in terms of changes? For example, we've already heard of, better meal service, for instance, directions to the staff, to the cabin crew. What are some of the bigger changes that you can already anticipate they'll have to make to the airline?
I think the bigger changes would be on the aircraft hardware part. The government has been now holding back their spending on repairing the aircraft. So typical things which you've seen in the past with Air India on broken seats or broken armrest and so on. I think that will be the immediate fixes. The money will be pumped in towards getting aircraft up and running into the air. So these are all a mix of hard and soft product, no? With a huge large group of hotels behind them trying to change the service offerings which are there, upgrading how the greetings go out and how the service spans out. From there to minor fixes on the hardware side is what I see happening immediately. The least that will happen is actually tinkering with the routes and seeing new stations or closing old stations. I think that requires a lot of data analysis, and getting into that comes in later.
Giving us a sense of the scale of the task at hand here. Ameya, with a quarter, when 25% plus of market share, how much pricing power are we going to see the Tatas have now when it comes to the aviation market?
Question. Currently, if you see 15 days, you are capped by the government. You cannot change prices in D plus 15 days. But beyond that, I think there will be a lot of effort done to have sale in place to ensure that you start seeing revenue, forward revenue. And after that, slowly try and differentiate and inch over and above their regular offerings and make it as close as possible to Vistara. And then have the clear distinction that you have two full service carriers in the country, and this is where the pricing is versus all the low cost carriers. But for that to happen, they need to slowly start showing the difference in terms of service and the hard product, because it's about asking people to pay that some amount more to ensure that you are getting a better experience than what you would with somebody else. And I think the best way to any Indian is by means of food, and that's where they are starting from. So food is something which is attractive to all of us, and it seems they've picked up the right thing to start with.
Ameya, thanks so much for joining us for a detailed look at really, what perhaps is in store for Air India as its new owners take over officially. Now, after a day's pause, markets were back in the red as the US Fed Reserve spooked investors by announcing a timeline to raise interest rates. After the crash in the morning, some buying in the afternoon also helping markets recover. Sensex declining about 580 points, barely holding on to 57,000. Nifty recovered over 200 points from its day's low to hold above 17,000. PSU Bank made a comeback, rallying over 5%. Even the auto pack staged a smart recovery. At the same time, IT and pharma stocks witnessed profit booking. Axis Bank, Maruti, SBI, Cipla, Kotak Mahindra Bank, some of the gainers today. And on the downside, HCL Tech, Tech Mahindra, Dr. Reddy, Wipro and TCS. So a lot of focus there on the defensives and IT names in particular. Excessive volatility on the global front is what's keeping markets on edge here in India as well. And the ongoing earnings season as well as the upcoming union budget will be keeping investors on their toes. Former Vice Chairman Niti Aayog, in conversation with our managing editor Siddharth Zarabi, acknowledges that the government needs to shift its focus on increasing debt to GDP ratio. Says that the union budget should actually focus on pumping capex and developing prudent fiscal policies. Listen in.
One more budget by the Modi government, practically the ninth full budget in its tenure. What do you think should happen as far as fiscal policy is concerned? Should the next financial year also be an expansionary one as far as the budget is concerned? Should Nirmala Sitharaman continue to keep the purse strings a little loose than before?
The debt to GDP ratio where we stand today is much higher. And so it is a bit of a concern, because what we are doing, again, as I said earlier, is to pass the burden, pass the buck to the next generation. Not fair. They shouldn't have to bear that burden. So I would be very cautious. I'm personally on the fiscal side. You saw me on monetary side. I'm a little more liberal. More of a dove rather than a hawk. But on the fiscal side, I tend to be more conservative, more hawkish. I would say that we need to be cautious there. The only circumstances under which I would say, all right, somewhat looser fiscal is if we use that extra room to expand capital expenditures, build up infrastructure yet further. I think that is productive, and so if we are committed to using those proceeds, we do that. The other thing we of course need to do is to simply go faster. Good progress. I think very pleased finally privatizations are happening.
Right.
The DIPAM has got onto the job. Finally, we have a DIPAM secretary who is on the go. So I'm certainly very pleased by that. But maybe we need to kind of push that a little faster. Likewise, asset monetization, etc., and try to kind of handle the fiscal that way. Because a double dividend, privatization helps productivity, and at the same time it helps the revenues. So perhaps try to do it that way. LIC, they're trying to do so. If that succeeds, that will be a big shot in the arm. So that might be the way to proceed.
Dr. Panagariya, my next question has to do with the direction of government spending and the focus on welfare that was also necessary during COVID times. Former Chief Economic Advisor Kaushik Basu has, in a recent interview with us, offered a very critical assessment, and he told my colleague Udyan Mukherjee recently that the government's economic mismanagement has meant that not enough is being done for the poor. Given that, how would you respond to the question that I posed to you?
Yeah, look, these are all platitudes. I'm sorry to say. Kaushik is a good friend, and I admire him. But when it comes to the policy, I'm not sure. Ultimately, Kaushik has to tell us what is he willing to cut, which is politically feasible. Anybody can say that not enough. Yes, all of us actually, who in India would be against doubling, tripling the expenditures or transfers to the poor. None of us would be, that 6,000 could be raised to 18,000. But again, where is the money going to come from? Who is the Kaushik willing to tax? Which expenditure is he willing to reduce? Which is politically feasible? Remember that he was also against farm laws. So is he willing to part with MSP? Can the government part with MSP? Can the government part with
Dr. Panagariya,
subsidy?
Absolutely. No. Please continue with the point. Let me just allow me to interject. He's also said that the economic policy being followed by the Modi government has worked well for the top end of society, but it has misfired for the bottom strata of society.
Is the voter telling you that? The voter continues to vote for Mr. Modi. And in fact, it's backed by the social programs. If you look at what has been done on the social expenditures, it's way ahead of previous governments actually, in terms of, well, first of all, money that is meant for the poor goes to the poor. It's not leaking. We know from the previous governments, the famous line from Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, that only 20 paise goes out of 1 rupee spent. Those have been, but more than that, look, urban subsidy on LPG was ended and it was transferred to the rural poor. Just imagine the life of Swachh Bharat, that is going to impact the health of the people. Then Nal Se Jal, and expanding at such a rapid pace, bringing water to everybody, every household. These are things making for the poor, all the Jan Dhan accounts, the transfers that started 6,000 rupees for farm families. These are all for the poor.
Minister of State, Electronics and IT, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, exudes confidence in India's semiconductor story, saying the 76,000 crore rupee semiconductor PLI will help startups and boost production in India.
What gives you the confidence that the current policy framework that you just spoke about, the 76,000 crore package, it will succeed this time? I ask you this because previous attempts in for example, 2017 or thereabouts with 2-3 companies have not succeeded. What gives you the confidence that it will work now?
First of all, there is a total reset in my opinion, and I say this with, I mean, you will say that I'm saying this because I'm a minister, I'm from the BJP, but I mean this sincerely. There is a total reset in the perception about India and its capabilities amongst the Western tech world or the tech ecosystem. And that has been reinforced by India's performance during COVID. To a large degree, India has earned a tremendous amount of awe and respect in the way our economy has rebounded during COVID, in the way technology has been used in the last 6 years that has allowed for this mass scale vaccination at a level and scale that even the world is not able to comprehend, and they are in awe of. And today the world looks at India in very, very different terms. It is not a India which is an India just of potential. The narrative of India for many, many decades, Siddharth, was we are a great country, we have a large population, and we have a great market, and therefore with great potential. And we did that with the IT services space, and we did, grew a lot. But where we missed out for several years was in deep tech, in electronics, in semiconductor. And today, the world looks at India, and I say this because I interact with all of the world's leading majors in terms of companies. And they look at India and India's ambitions being backed by an execution capability and an execution record by this government that is very credible. It is one thing to dream. It is the other thing to have dreams that are backed by people who are able to realize those dreams into reality. And the government of India today, and India particularly, is seen today as a country that not only is dreaming big, but also has the ability in government, its startups, its entrepreneurs, as having the ability to realize those dreams and make it a reality. Look, today, when the Honorable Prime Minister talks with such a lot of affection and respect for our startups and talks about 2 unicorns every month, it is something that is absolutely astonishing to the rest of the world that we are creating one of the world's largest sustainably growing startup ecosystems.
Right.
So in the tech space, Siddharth, in a nutshell, the world sees India as a leading player in technology. And as the new normal of the world is increasing digitization of the world, Web 3.0, Industry 4.0, and all of those things that are going to continue to disrupt and change the new normals, everybody realizes that India and Indian entrepreneurs and Indian talent are going to be part of the leadership of this global technology drive. And therefore, that credibility and respect for India is there today. So today, when the global semiconductor majors engage with India, it is no longer with skepticism. It is with absolute serious, earnest interest in understanding our mission, our policies, and our goals for electronics and semiconductor and technology in general.
And that's where we leave it on the show today. Thanks so much for watching.